You're listening to Breaking the Silence on the Fight the Lies Radio Network. Welcome to Breaking the Silence. You know, I sit here today for the record, April 23rd, 2016, and incidentally, it's also Passover. And I'm sitting here and I'm, just contemplating a few things. And as I had stated in the previous podcast, with this show, it's sort of more of an impromptu, as I feel led and inspired to talk about certain things, to talk about them. No pressure, right? So I have two things that are on my mind today, and this is going to be a short episode, hopefully. And one of them is a follow-up to the previous podcast on a thought, a theory, an argument, if you will, that I failed to mention. And two is a bit more personal. So the follow-up part. In our case for the existence of God, there is an argument, and I have to give credit to William Lane Craig. He is a Christian philosopher who approaches everything from, a logical, analytical, scientific way of presenting them. It probably deeply inspires my own approach here. Well, his premise and others, as well as myself, is what's called the moral argument. And the moral argument simply states this: if God does not exist, objective moral values and duties do not exist. Number two, objective moral values and duties do exist. And number three, therefore, God exists. Now, let me break that down a little bit. When we say objective moral values, we mean something that amongst human beings, on the whole, the vast majority, something that we seem to be almost born with feeling is right and wrong. I mean, people can argue all day long that some person in some far disconnected culture may consider cannibalism okay, and even though 99.9% of the rest of the Earth's population does not, they do. So how can you say that that value is something that's by necessity a universal human value? Well, one could argue in that sense that they still have the same intrinsic moral compass in regards to that, but because of injections of other ideas that were come up through their history, they created a religious, if you will, construct in their mind that justified what their nature told them was wrong. Well, anyways, the point being is that objective morality is the thing that would say that there are rights and wrongs, and that most people would agree. And that runs counter to evolutionary thought, which says that there's no God, there is no deeper existence, that everything has happened by the sheer will of evolution, that there's no meaning to it other than to replicate oneself and to survive in the grand game of life. And that any useful behavior that benefits the whole is only practiced because it does benefit the whole, not because it's necessarily right or wrong. And really that sort of defines the worldview and the philosophy, and certainly in our culture today when we talk about things such as abortion or any other of the big controversial issues of our day that everyone are fighting over. So if we would agree that objective morality cannot exist according to evolution, because objective morality states that there are absolute rights and wrongs, that murdering a child is absolutely wrong, and what sane, rational human being would think otherwise. So if we are to agree that there are those absolutes, but yet, according to evolutionary theory, those absolutes cannot exist because, well, let's use the murdering a child as an example. If you only have evolution, if you have no deeper meaning, no higher, if you will, plane of existence, and certainly no God, then if your group was in a situation where murdering the child was beneficial to the whole, then according to that philosophy, then that whole would decide that let's murder the child. It's good. But yet we, as the vast majority of humanity, have never come to that conclusion. Well, unless you categorize abortion under that, and, well, let's be honest with ourselves, if we fit in and accept as a possible explanation for our current value system here in our culture in America in 2016 concerning abortion, then we would say that because we have adopted the religion, and don't kid yourself, it is a religion, the religion of evolutionary theory, then we have created our own set of morals based upon that. Like it or not, whether you believe in a deeper meaning or a deeper level of existence or God, either way, you have a moral system that you expect yourself and others to live by. Well, I don't want to get off onto a rabbit trail here. It's not like I would ever do that. Come on, folks. If we're to say that it is true that objective morality exists, then we have to come to the conclusion that there is indeed a God who exists, because who else would define that morality? Who else would monitor and administer that morality? Because if there's nothing else, well, life comes and goes. You know, if the universe is indeed 14 billion years old approximately, there's been a vast amount of life having come and gone. We're just a blip on the radar of the universe, and our entire human history is infinitesimally small. Yet we have this consistent thread of what's right and wrong woven throughout our history. And of course, we can't speak for the rest of the history of the universe. We can't observe that or measure that. We haven't yet. And who knows if we ever will. Certainly on our current course of human events, we do not seem to be headed along the path that will take us to the stars and to discover all those things out there, as much as I would love to see that happen. So anyways, this was intended as a short, quick point, an introduction to the concept of the moral argument. Again, to sum it up, if you feel that there are certain rights and wrongs, you're not religious at all, you don't believe in God at all, but you feel like there are certain things that are right and certain things are wrong, that you don't think it's okay for your neighbor to come into your house, take your child and slaughter him, then what's your basis for saying that that's wrong? Because you care for your child? Well, what if he doesn't care for your child? I mean, obviously he wouldn't if he murdered them. Who's to say whose morality is right and wrong? Who defines that? Maybe another person comes along and says, well, I think that you're messed up for being mad at that guy for killing your child, because who are you to say what's right and wrong? You see, you get into a paradox. Again, just like with the previous show, I'm not here to try to prove or disprove anything to you. I'm just trying to present food for thought. So as I said, there was sort of a second point I wanted to make here, and that was a bit more personal. Like I said, today's Passover, it actually began last night at sunset. And of course, for those who don't know, Passover is the commemoration of the events that took place in the biblical book of Exodus, where the children of Israel were in slavery. And so it happened that Moses, he was born, and there had been this expectation that a figure would arise amongst the Israelites that would free them from their slavery. And the ruling class, the Pharaoh, had made a decree that all these children born during this time were to be killed. And of course, the nanny, so to speak, for Moses decided that she didn't want him to die. So she took him and put him in a little makeshift raft and put him in the water. And he was discovered by a relative of Pharaoh's who provided for him, raised him, and educated him thoroughly in the Egyptian schools of thought. And then eventually he saw another slave being beaten. He killed the Egyptian guard, and then he fled off into the desert. And so the biblical account goes as he has this encounter with God, who tells him he wants him to go back to Egypt. This was after he'd got married, found a whole family, and a fairly wealthy lifestyle by the standards of the age, and independent as well. And so God tells him he wants him to go back to Egypt, and he wants him to free these slaves, and he wants him to confront Pharaoh and tell him that God has told him to do this. And of course, if one reads and believes the biblical narrative, God knew exactly what would happen, and he was wanting to demonstrate himself to the Egyptians as well as Israel. He was wanting to prove to Israel and the Egyptians that he was the one true God, and that he was capable of doing, well, whatever he wants to do, but certainly fulfilling his promises to their ancestor Abraham that he would bring them out and make them a great nation. Most people know the story, especially if you've ever seen the Charlton Heston movie or even the Disney cartoon, which, by the way, it took a lot of liberty with the biblical narrative, but, really not a bad film overall. But anyways, obviously Pharaoh ends up refusing to release these Israelites, and they end up at conflict with each other, Moses and Pharaoh, and consequently God releases these plagues upon Egypt, and eventually the final one was the angel of death coming in and literally killing all the firstborn in Egypt. And that would have included Israelites, save for the fact that God had instructed them to take a lamb from their household and sacrifice it and put the blood around their doorframe. And in doing that, it would seal them and protect them against the angel of death. And they were also instructed to take their flour and just simply add water to it and make dough and put it in their pouches and take it with them, because, if you don't leaven it, you could just basically make flatbread and bake it real quick, versus leavening something. It's going to take a long time if you ever baked bread, and it's going to go bad if you don't bake it soon. So he basically told them to get that stuff together, get all your belongings together, and be ready to get out. The events play out. Pharaoh relents and tells them to get the heck out of Egypt. And they go off to wandering in the desert for 40 years. That, in a nutshell, is the Passover story. And we are instructed biblically, it's not precise to call it a Jewish holiday or a Jewish feast day even. It is a biblical feast day. It is something that really God has intended for all of us to, enjoy and learn from. Notice I differentiate from saying obey, because, that's simply legalism, and it makes you miss the entire point. Trust me, I used to do it. I had everything ready before sunset. I had my meal ready. I had the table set up. I had my script planned out for the Passover Seder. That's the dinner where we actually go through this ceremony of remembrance. And if I missed a beat, man, I beat myself up over it. Let me tell you. And if I did anything that I felt was off during that time, I beat myself up over it. And, made sure the house was clean of yeast, made sure that I only ate things that did not possibly have yeast in them throughout the whole period. So again, don't worry about obeying it if you're trying to do this. Enjoy it and learn from it, because really what it was a lesson in what to expect from the Messiah to come. If you read the New Testament at all, you often see Yeshua, Jesus, referred to as the Lamb. He's referred to as the one lamb that was slain before the foundation of the earth. And also, his blood was shed so that eternal death would pass us over. When Yeshua went into Jerusalem and he sees his Talmudim, his disciples, and tells them, hey, there's this guy, he has his house, go up there and ask him if you guys can use it, prepare a place, set up the table, get the dinner ready, right? They go up there, the famous picture, everyone's seen it, whether you're a believer or not, the Last Supper, right? That was a Passover Seder. The Passover Seder is where we take the implements that we were instructed to use in Torah to remember what God did for us and what he is going to do. The unleavened bread, it's to remember the bondage of slavery and the deliverance out of it. The wine that we drink, it's to remember that blood that was put on the doorpost. The bitter herbs were to remember the bitterness of slavery. And we also have this, though it's not in a biblical instruction, it's a tradition that actually goes back to antiquity. We also make something that resembles, or is intended to resemble, mortar between bricks. We call it haroset, and it's like a mixture of apples and dates and nuts and other fruits. And it's my favorite part, actually. I make enough to last me the entire week of the unleavened bread. So we have all this and we have it at our table and we go through the biblical passages, and, you know, everybody does it a little bit differently, but we discuss what God did and the symbology in it pointing to the future. And we go through each of these, you know, it's very ritualized. We go through each of these implements and we recite the verses. Like we take our wine and we sprinkle it on our napkin so you don't make a mess on your table, right? But we sprinkle it on there and we recite each plague. And the idea is that wine representing blood is demonstrating yet again how those curses, those judgments were not applied to Israel. Well, anyway, so you have Yeshua and his disciples at the table having the Passover Seder. And what does he do? He takes the bread out and he says, hey, this is my body. When you do this, do it in remembrance of me. And he drinks this wine and he has these things he says through the narrative. And they, if you understand the order of the traditional Seder, each of those very much line up with what we recite and do when we are having a Seder. So the point being about that is that he was not doing anything that was alien or foreign in the Hebrew context. He was, after all, the Hebrew of Hebrews, right? I mean, he was from the line of David, through the line that God had promised that he would come through. Well, anyway, so I really didn't intend to go on a lesson about Passover, but it's that time and it's really on my mind, and it's just something that's a real blessing to us. And I really hope that it would be a blessing to others if you just check it out. And here's my bit more personal story. Yesterday, I was on my way home from work, and where we live in the state of Virginia, we live in Virginia Beach, and I actually work in Hampton, Virginia, and there's a body of water in between us, and the only way across are two different bridge tunnels. And both of them, let me tell you what, it's a practice in insanity most any day, unless you go to work or back home from work, like at 4 a.m, which is when I go to work. It's a great drive then, but coming home, not so great. Anyways, there had been an accident. The tunnel was backed up. And then all of a sudden, things started moving super fast. Like we were going from sitting still to all of a sudden everybody's going 50. And I'm like, hey, we're moving. So we get in a tunnel, and I want to say within like 5 seconds of getting in a tunnel, someone 3 or 4 cars up decides it's a good idea to just stop for no really rational reason. Well, I had to slam on my brakes and my car goes sliding. I'm hearing the squealing. I'm smelling the rubber. Everything's in slow motion, right? If you've ever had any kind of car accident, your perception of time really changes, and it seems like everything goes in slow motion, which maybe it's a gift God gives us because, hey, we need that extra time to be able to react, right? So it goes in slow motion, and literally my car goes from going fast enough to be a very bad accident to like about a mile or two an hour when I actually hit the car in front of me. And I could tell right away that thank God there was no damage and that no one got hurt, obviously. And really my nerves were shot at that point, and things start moving again. The car in front of me just sort of keeps going like, okay, are they going to stop or what? I don't really want to stop in the middle of this tunnel. Everybody's going to hate us then. Well, we get through the tunnel and that car pulls over on the side in the area dedicated for people that need to pull over. And I pull over too. And it's this young girl, probably no more than 21. And I could tell she was, she seemed, she didn't get out of the car irate, but I could tell she was a bit shot too, so to speak. And I get out and I walk over to look at her car and I'm like, wow, I'm very apologetic, just, talking probably a million miles an hour and just feeling bad and trying to be as friendly as I can be because, that's what you do after you have something like that happen. And I asked her, well, are you okay? Does it look like there's any damage? And she said, not really. It looks like there might have been a little scuff from the screws on your license plate. And I said, well, do you feel like we should probably exchange information, right? And she said, yeah, I just got this car 3 days ago, yada, yada, yada. So we go up and exchange information. And, and I even told her, thank God we're okay. Thank God that no one got hurt because this could have been far worse. And it was very friendly and cordial. And dare I say, in a situation like that, it was a pleasant encounter. Driving back home, just sort of stressed out the whole time. But I'm realizing as I'm going that death has passed me over, and it's the eve of Passover. And this is far from the first time or the closest time I've come to death in a car. If anyone's listened to my testimony many years ago, I blacked out at the wheel of a car, flipped my car over 3 times, didn't have my seatbelt on, and should have died. By all rights, I should have died. The car caught on fire. I was like just literally next door to a fire and rescue station. And all I ended up doing was breaking my jaw. And unfortunately, although I'm hesitant to talk about it, and I won't really go into it here, if you want to know a bit more, you could listen to my testimony. But other people got hurt, and thank God no one died. And as far as I know, there was no permanent injuries. But it's one of those things that I really felt a lot of shame and regret and self-hatred over through all those years. Even though I wasn't drinking, I didn't intentionally do anything wrong. The fact remained that if I hadn't have been there in that place and time, it wouldn't have happened. Well, anyway, so when something like this happens in a car, for me, it sets off and triggers all those memories, those feelings, those emotions come back. Ugh. So anyways, I'm on my way home and I needed to stop to get our supplies for Passover because, well, I've been busy all week. I've been working on this show and just working, getting a lack of sleep and test going to the grocery store most of the time. But I should have done it because when I get to my first option, there's literally nothing left. The shelves have been cleared out. And so I start calling other grocery stores before even leaving. Hey, do you guys sell Passover products? And the first place is like, Passover product? What's that? And I tried to explain, well, matzah, it looks like a big giant saltine, right? And he's like, no, I can take a message and have the manager call. I'm like, no, it's okay. I'm in the area. I just didn't want to drive around too much. I thought I'd call some places. So then I call another place and they have some. So I go over there and I find all my stuff and pretty satisfied with it. And I go up to the register and I'm getting checked out and one guy's bagging my stuff and he's like, well, thanks, have a nice day. He goes to another line to bag. And by the time I'm done paying, another young guy comes up and he's picking up my bags and handing them to me. And I'm like, wow, thanks. And he says to me, I hope you have a really nice Seder. Now, understand, we're not in a big Jewish area. I mean, most people, they look at this stuff, they don't know what it is, especially not the term Seder. And I started to rush off real quick because there were other people in line and it's like, once again, slam on the brakes. I turn around and I'm like, man, thanks. Are you Jewish? And he's like, no, I'm Christian, I'm Baptist, but my congregation has a real appreciation for Jewish traditions and the biblical feast days and all that. And I just think it's really good. And I'm friends with some people who are Jewish, so it's always been interesting to me. And I proceeded to tell him, well, I'm Messianic, by the way, so we're on the same ship, so to speak. And and that was about the extent of the conversation. It was just really amazing to me, those little things that pop up in life like that. I mean, like I said, it's not very common that people even know what Passover is. So, I head home and embrace my wife and get out my sob story and, oh, honey, I'm so stressed out. I'm glad I'm just home. And proceed to prepare the stuff for Passover. And actually, traditionally, we would have started last night at sunset, but we're not so legalistic as we once were. So we've just decided to wait till today because I didn't want to do it and be rushed and like, okay, let's get this done. We got to do this and all that. So anyways, we're looking forward to doing that today. And I just wanted to get on here and quickly just sort of share these experiences and these thoughts. Like I said, this show is just sort of an opportunity for me to get on here and get things off my chest and maybe hopefully at times get a bit deeper and a bit more profound. And maybe other times I'll just share these goofy sort of things, these near-death experiences. Hopefully I don't have another one for a while. And, maybe it will speak to somebody else. Maybe it'll encourage you. I don't know. Maybe you can relate to it. God knows. I hope somebody out there can relate to the sometimes craziness of my life. Anyways, I just want to thank everyone for listening. To those who are celebrating it, Chag Sameach, happy Passover. And I will speak to you guys real soon. Breaking the Silence is a production of Fight the Lies Ministries. Visit us at ftlradio.net. This program is released under Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Intro and outro music by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com.